Hello and welcome to the Stool Pigeons. I'm Jack Jameswood.
And I'm Harrison Davenport.
So Harrison, I think we have a different Mark on the Green story where he finds himself to be at the center of attention.
Yes, we do. And for the second and third parts of this story, those are going to be available on our Patreon, as is the final chapter of My Wife and Her Boss. I know several people had been asking, so I just wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way. So the title of this story, which is coming from our Cheating Stories series, is My Best Friend's Wife. A lot of you have been reading the story about my wife and her boss and have asked if I've had any affairs. Over the years, I've slept with a few different women, but this one in particular is the strangest circumstance. I thought it was a good place to start. According to my Facebook history, this all started around a year ago. Most people grow up having friends in their neighborhood that they hang out with. There were definitely plenty of people my age that lived on my street. There was one person in particular that would regularly come over to my house, and I would go to theirs to skateboard. We would throw tennis balls into traffic and steal candy from the dollar store. We were mischievous, but never malicious. My friend was part of a large family that had big gatherings at their house on a regular basis. My friend's parents were super inviting to me, and always let me stay for dinner or sleep over. His cousins would regularly be over at his house, and we all got to know each other really well. I considered him my best friend growing up. He is the one who introduced me to his cousin, who later became my wife. He was never weird about me dating his cousin or hanging out with her instead of him. We remained good friends all the way through high school. He never seemed to have much luck with the ladies. He was not a bad-looking guy, but was very shy. One day, he surprisingly introduced me to his new girlfriend. She was a Spanish girl with a beautiful face and lips that you could stare at for days. She has perfect hips and a big butt that barely fits her frame. She was super nice and appeared to be a bit out of his league. The two of them seemed to hit it off nicely. My best friend and I now had a 4-person squad, with our ladies by our side. My wife really enjoyed skating and was actually pretty good at it. His girlfriend didn't skate, but enjoyed hanging out with the group. We skated and hung out through high school. As time went on, we became more distant and found ourselves in our own lanes of life. As I said, I ended up marrying my best friend's cousin. He ended up marrying the Spanish girl from high school. Since I had known her, my best friend's wife had always taken care of her body. She became even more attractive as we got older, and was way out of my best friend's and my league. My best friend and his wife bought a house and have 2 kids together. I often remember being really turned on by her Facebook photos online. I remember wishing I could see more of her, but was never lucky or stupid enough to try. One day, my wife's cousin messaged me and asked me if I wanted to go to the lake with him and his wife. He said they weren't going to bring their kids because they wanted to have a few drinks on the water. That Saturday, we dropped the kids off at my friend's parents' house so they could all play together while we were out. We decided we would carpool together since there wasn't a lot of parking at the marina. My wife wore a black 1-piece swimsuit that hugged her body perfectly. His wife was wearing a pink 2-piece swimsuit that barely fit. When we were putting the boat in the water, we recognized the couple in front of us who had just put their boat in. We were all friends throughout high school. They were there celebrating their 2-year wedding anniversary. We decided to invite them to come out and have some drinks with us on the water. They said they were going to drive around for a while, but would meet up with us later. I assumed they wanted to go hook up on their boat and enjoy each other's company before hanging out with us. We decided that we would go to a secluded cove that we had been to before. It was early in the year to be on the lake, so we had the place to ourselves despite the perfect weather. Once we anchored the boat, I decided to sit in the back to get a better view of the ladies, as I enjoyed a beer. A few moments later, my wife started unbuttoning her shorts and pulled them down to her feet. My friend's wife turned to me and asked if I would help her pull the canopy up because she wasn't tall enough to pull both sides. I grabbed the corner and pulled it over my head. His wife then walked towards the back of the boat, and I watched as she pulled her shorts down. The right side of her swimsuit was being swallowed up by her perfect butt. As she bent over to pull her shorts all the way down, I couldn't stop staring. I hesitated for a second and looked over at my wife's cousin. He was looking at me and saw that I was staring directly at his wife. I remembered that he had a small smile on his face. He then reached down into the cooler and said, "Let's drink some beers." During the next hour, we all drank a lot of beer. We got a call from our friends we saw earlier in the day. We told them where we were and to come meet us. Their boat was smaller than ours, so we invited them over. Thankfully, they had more beers that they weren't going to be able to drink. We were glad that we didn't have to go back to the marina to restock. They were a cute couple. She was wearing a nice black two-piece swimsuit. I jokingly said to them, "Did you guys celebrate yet?" They both laughed and didn't say anything else. This told me everything I needed to know about what they were doing before they met up with us. This must have turned everyone in the boat on to some degree. We all took turns jumping off the side of the boat. There was a small ledge at the end of the boat where everyone could dive in or do flips. After a while of doing this, most of us just hung out in the water or laid on the boat to get some sun. My best friend's wife, the guy we went to high school with, and I were still floating around in the water. The ladder to get back into the boat was on the back side. There were only 2 steps in the water, so it wasn't easy getting out onto the ladder. I watched as our high school friend climbed into the boat, leaving myself and my best friend's wife in the water. I was floating by myself, and she was on a small tube that they had brought. Out of nowhere, she asked me if I could boost her up on the ladder, so she could get back on the boat. I told her I would try, but I was pretty buzzed, and she was too. We swam to the back of the boat, and I immediately realized that no one could really see us where we were. Almost everyone was near the front of the boat, laying down on the deck. Her husband was sitting in the captain's seat, with his legs up on the dash. He had on dark sunglasses. Everyone had been drinking quite a bit, and seemed to be pretty laid back. My wife seemed to be napping in the sun. When we got to the ladder, I told her to put her feet on the ladder, and I would try to push her up. If you've ever tried to boost somebody up in the water, you know that it doesn't work well at all. She put her feet at the bottom of the step, and I used my shoulder to push her up from the bottom of her leg. As I went to pull up, my hands accidentally slid in between her thighs. I honestly didn't mean to do it at all. She was facing away from me, but turned around quickly and looked at me. I was so embarrassed, and I could tell she was as well. I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." She looked back at me and said, "I won't tell if you don't." I laughed a little bit and asked if she wanted to try that again. She fell back into the water and said yes. She went over to the ladder. When I swam up behind her to boost her up, she pushed her body back toward me. I could feel her butt rub against my stomach area. She grabbed both handles on the ladder and purposely pushed herself back into me. My body immediately froze. Even though I knew she did it on purpose, I told myself it was an accident. My best friend's wife, who I had known for 10 years, was literally pushing her body onto mine underwater where no one could see. I sat still for a moment, just using my arms to keep myself floating in the water. She turned her body toward me. She grabbed the ladder with one hand and reached into the water with her other hand. She then slid her hand into my swimming shorts. I hesitated for a second before reaching my arm out and grabbing the ladder. I was nervous and scared at the same time. I didn't want anyone to see us or think we were doing anything back there. Her soft hand started to move up and down really slow. I pulled her closer to me. She leaned in and kissed me. At first, it was a small kiss. Then she leaned into me, and we started making out in the water. Her hand started to move faster underneath the water. This went on for a few minutes before we tried to take things a bit further. As I started to make the next move, she said, "We can't do this here." She had this look in her eyes that she wanted to keep going, but we both knew we couldn't. She then turned around and started climbing up the ladder. As her butt came out of the water, she pushed it back towards me, and for some reason, I kissed the back of her leg. I stayed in the water for a few minutes, so that it didn't look suspicious. I had to wait to be less excited from what had just happened before I got out of the water. When I came to the top deck, she was lying on the back of the boat on a big towel, drying off in the sun. Her husband was sitting in the same spot, but was now facing the back of the boat. As I pulled myself up onto the boat, he asked, "What were you doing back there?" I told him I was hanging onto the ladder enjoying the water. My heart was racing, and I was so turned on from what had just happened. I couldn't believe what I had just done with my best friend's wife moments before that. It felt like a dream. We spent another hour or two on the water before saying goodbye to our friends and heading back to the marina. The girl stayed down near the boat while my best friend and I walked to get his truck. He stayed pretty quiet the whole time. I couldn't tell if he was suspicious or just had too much to drink. I was the only one of us that wasn't drunk, so I decided to drive the truck back home. The girls both fell asleep in the car. My buddy and I listened to the radio and talked about old times. I was still confused, and turned on as we gave each other hugs and said goodbye. My mind was so caught up in everything that happened that I wasn't saying much. My wife asked me if everything was okay. I told her that everything was fine and that I was just tired. Later that evening, I got a message on Facebook from my friend's wife. I was hesitant to open it, but wanted to know what she said. The message read, "We need to finish what we started." I was immediately nervous again and didn't know exactly how to respond. I know it seems crazy in retrospect, but I was genuinely afraid of continuing what had happened earlier. This woman was my best friend's wife. I was also so turned on that I wrote her back and said, "LOL, maybe sometime." Well, apparently that wasn't good enough. She immediately responded and said, "Come over Wednesday. My husband works all day." I didn't know how to respond. I told her I was hesitant about the situation, and she kept telling me it was fine. She said that we could enjoy ourselves, and nobody had to know. Eventually, I told her I would probably come by Wednesday. I will update this story if anything else happens. Okay, Jack, so that concludes this story. So I have a bit of a theory that I want to run by you.
Go for it.
So, do you think that Mark on the Green is subconsciously getting back at his wife by cheating with her cousin's wife? Do you think that's a possibility at all?
No.
Okay, very good.
But I'll tell you what we do have, and that's some comments here.
All right, hit us with them.
This comes from Sung Jin Woo 413, who asks, "When are you dropping part 2? Mark on the Green answers, "I will probably write later tonight and post in the morning. Depends on if I get time at work. I work alone, so it makes it easier." And Tiny3192 says, "Oh snap, these stories. LOL. Mark on the Green has done it again, created another interesting story. This time, he's on the other end of it."
Yeah, I agree, Jack. And I don't have too much to add because I know we've gone into detail about Mark on the Green, so people can listen to our previous comments and commentary. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to this?
No, and if they want a more thorough accounting of our thoughts on Mark on the Green, they can also head on over to our podcast last week where we discussed Mark on the Green as a presence on Reddit.
Yes, our podcast is available on all major platforms, and parts 2 and 3 of this story are also going to be on our Patreon if you enjoyed this. Okay, Jack, you ready to get out of here?
Yep.
Okay, thank you for listening, and please remember to hit the subscribe button.